If you were sick in early America, you wouldn't find comfort in hospitals or clean white coats. You'd find chaos. Jars filled with blood, saws still dripping from the last patient, and a doctor with whiskey on his breath, insisting that pain was proof the cure was working. In the 18th and 19th centuries, medicine wasn't science. It was theater, a performance of confidence wrapped in superstition, quackery, and genuine terror. And the patients? They were the audience and the victims. Imagine walking into a town apothecary in 1805. The smell hits first: sharp alcohol, tobacco, rot. Behind the counter are glass bottles labeled with elegant handwriting: mercury chloride, laudanum, radium water. The pharmacist, in his stained apron, swirls a cloudy mixture and smiles reassuringly. "Drink this twice daily," he says. "It'll bring your humors back into balance." You hand him your last coins and drink poison disguised as medicine. The guiding theory behind all of this madness was the ancient belief in the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, they said, was a balance among them. Illness was imbalance. So if you had a fever or infection, doctors tried to restore balance by removing fluids, usually your blood. This is where bloodletting became an American obsession. Doctors used a spring-loaded brass instrument called a scarificator. Imagine a tiny metal box with hidden blades. With a flick, it would slice your skin in neat parallel lines. Then they'd place leeches on the wounds to suck out more blood. A mild case meant losing about 10 ounces. A serious illness could mean pints. One Philadelphia doctor proudly recorded that he had drawn 80 ounces of blood from a single patient in 24 hours. That patient died, but the doctor noted that the treatment was most appropriate. Even George Washington, the father of the country, wasn't spared. In December 1799, he caught a simple throat infection. His physicians, the best in Virginia, bled him 4 times in 2 days, draining nearly half his total blood volume. When he died, they praised their diligence. Washington's death certificate didn't list infection. It listed excessive depletion. That was what counted as professional medicine. If you were lucky, you only got bloodletting. But if you had a stubborn illness, say, a fever that wouldn't break, your doctor might prescribe calomel, a compound made from mercury chloride. Mercury, the same liquid metal now classified as a neurotoxin, was considered a universal purifier. It would flush the system, they said. In reality, it made patients vomit, sweat, and drool uncontrollably. Their teeth fell out. Their gums turned black. Some lost their minds before their organs failed. But in the bizarre logic of 19th century medicine, those were all signs the treatment was working. The most fashionable doctors in early America trained in Europe, where they learned that purging and poisoning were the marks of sophistication. They brought those methods back proudly, and people trusted them. After all, the alternatives were worse: dying in the street or being treated by a local root doctor. But even the herbalists weren't innocent. Some brewed tonics laced with arsenic or antimony because they believed poisons could be tempered to heal. By the mid-1800s, a new craze swept through American cities: patent medicines. These weren't approved, tested, or even described honestly. They were sold by traveling showmen and advertised in newspapers as miracle elixirs. The labels promised to cure everything from consumption to heartbreak. One of the most popular? Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, marketed for teething babies. It worked because it contained morphine. Thousands of infants across America were dosed daily with pure narcotics. Many never woke up. The deaths were labeled crib death, but everyone knew the cause. Still, parents kept buying it, desperate for relief in a world with no alternatives. Adults had their own poisons. Cocaine, opium, and alcohol-laced tonics flooded the market. Veng Mariani, a French import, mixed Bordeaux wine with coca leaves. The same plant used to make cocaine. It became a hit among the elite. Even Pope Leo XIII endorsed it, claiming it gave him divine energy. In America, entrepreneurs copied it. Their most famous creation, Coca-Cola, originally marketed as a medicinal nerve tonic in 1886, complete with real cocaine. People drank it believing it cured exhaustion and depression. In reality, it just kept them wired and addicted. The line between medicine and madness blurred completely. Some treatments were born out of genuine observation and twisted beyond reason. When doctors noticed that syphilis patients sometimes improved after a fever, they decided to induce one artificially. How? By infecting patients with malaria. They called it fever therapy. The idea was that the malaria fever would burn out the syphilis bacteria. Sometimes it even worked, before killing the patient from malaria instead. Others were far darker. In asylums and hospitals, electric shock therapy and lobotomies became the cutting edge of progress. Electrodes were strapped to skulls. Patients convulsed until unconscious. In some cases, the shocks stopped not only delusions, but memory, emotion, and will. And while the most gruesome lobotomy craze would come in the 20th century, its roots were already forming in these Victorian beliefs that pain purified and the mind could be reset by force. But even the ordinary home remedies of the 1800s were dangerous. Housewives treated illness with what they could find: turpentine, kerosene, iodine, and even tobacco smoke enemas. Yes, you heard that right. Doctors genuinely believed that blowing tobacco smoke into a patient's rectum could resuscitate drowning victims. London hospitals kept tobacco enema kits by the River Thames for emergencies. The treatment spread to America, where it was used for cholera, colds, and sluggish digestion. Eventually, when doctors realized nicotine was toxic, the method quietly vanished. But for decades, it was considered state-of-the-art resuscitation. Even childbirth, already deadly, was made worse by doctors' ignorance. In the early 1800s, many physicians went straight from dissecting corpses to delivering babies without washing their hands. Women developed puerperal fever, a horrific infection that spread through maternity wards like wildfire. Thousands died in agony. When a Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis suggested that doctors simply wash their hands, his colleagues mocked him. "Gentlemen's hands do not carry disease," they said. He was driven out of medicine and died in an asylum. Medicine in early America wasn't just primitive, it was proud of its cruelty. Patients were told to endure pain as a test of moral strength. Surgery was performed without anesthesia until ether was discovered in 1846. And even then, many surgeons refused to use it, claiming it was unchristian to dull pain. Operations were a race against time. A leg amputation in under 90 seconds was the mark of a master. If the patient survived shock and infection, it was considered a miracle. You'd think all of this ended with the rise of modern science. But even into the 20th century, America was still experimenting on its own people. Doctors fed radioactive cereal to children in orphanages to study absorption. Others injected prisoners with diseases in exchange for shortened sentences. Every generation believed it had moved beyond the barbarism of the past, and every generation found new ways to prove it hadn't. What is truly disturbing isn't that early Americans believed in bizarre cures. It's that they believed them completely. Medicine wasn't a field of study. It was an act of faith. You didn't question your doctor, even as he bled you dry or poured mercury down your throat. And yet, in a strange way, that faith built the foundation for modern medicine. Every failure, every death, every grotesque experiment forced the next generation to ask a little harder. What if this isn't healing? But before germ theory, before anesthesia, before antibiotics, people lived and died believing that pain was the price of life. And you, standing in that candlelit apothecary, watching your doctor reach for a scalpel, would have believed it too. Because in early America, suffering wasn't a sign of disease. It was the cure. If you made it this far, you already know. History isn't clean. It's blood, sweat, and superstition. And what we call progress was built on centuries of mistakes. So if you're fascinated by how dark the human pursuit of knowledge can get, hit that subscribe button, because we only just scratching the surface of what people once did in the name of healing. What's your cure for curiosity? Drop it in the comments. By the late 1800s, America was obsessed with progress. Electricity, steam power, railroads, everything was glowing, moving, humming with possibility. But that same optimism spilled into medicine, and it became dangerous. Because in the age of invention, anything that looked scientific sold, even if it killed you. That's when the era of electrical medicine began. Doctors, inventors, and con men all promised miracles through the invisible power of current. They sold electric belts for virility, electric combs to cure baldness, and even electric corsets that supposedly straightened the spine and improved mood. One ad from 1893 shouted, "Electricity is life. Weakness is death. Wear our belt and be restored." The devices were crude, zinc plates, copper wires, and a tiny wet battery pack that tingled the skin. But people swore by them. They felt the shock, so it must have been working. For pain, women used violet ray wands, glass rods that buzzed with purple light when plugged in. The marketing claimed they could heal arthritis, acne, and female hysteria. Some women kept them hidden, not because they were ashamed, but because the wands were often dual purpose. It was medical technology, an erotic device, all in one. The fascination with the invisible extended to radiation itself. When Marie and Pierre Curie discovered radium in 1898, the world was enchanted. It glowed in the dark. It looked like bottled life. So, of course, businessmen saw profit. Soon, Americans were drinking Radithor, a revitalizing tonic that was literally radioactive water. It was marketed as a youth elixir. Its slogan, "Perpetual sunshine in a bottle." One famous user, industrialist Eben Byers, swore it made him feel invincible. He drank 3 bottles a day. By the time doctors examined him, his jaw had completely disintegrated from radiation poisoning. His bones were riddled with holes. He was buried in a lead-lined coffin. The newspapers called him the man who glowed to death. But the horror didn't end there. Their bosses told them to lip point their brushes, to twist the bristles between their lips for precision. They were told it was harmless. Some even painted their teeth and nails for fun. Years later, their jaws rotted away. Their bodies emitted faint light in the dark. When they sued, the company accused them of syphilis to discredit their claims. The radium girls didn't just die. They exposed the cost of blind trust in scientific cures. But while radiation killed quietly, medicine shows killed loudly. Traveling performers roamed the country, pitching miracle tonics between songs and comedy routines. Under the flickering glow of lanterns, they sold Dr. King's New Discovery and Kickapoo Indian Sagwa, both mixtures of alcohol, sugar, and a sprinkle of opium or cocaine. The crowd didn't care. They felt better. That's how modern pharmaceutical marketing was born. Not in labs, but in carnival tents. As the 20th century approached, another wave of pseudoscience swept through America: spiritual healing. Faith healers, mesmerists, and magnetic doctors claimed they could channel cosmic energy to cure illness. Patients would line up in tents, trembling, while a man in a white suit shouted, "Be healed," and pressed his palms to their foreheads. Some collapsed, some cried, and many swore they felt cured. Psychologists later called it the placebo effect. But in the moment, it was divine. Not all of these healers were frauds. Some genuinely believed in their powers. One of them, Mary Baker Eddy, founded the Christian Science movement, which taught that sickness was an illusion of the mind, and that faith alone could cure any disease. Her movement spread rapidly across America, and even though many died refusing medical treatment, the idea that the mind can heal the body still echoes today. Then came the era of hygiene and eugenics. By the early 1900s, doctors finally accepted that germs caused disease. Soap, sanitation, and vaccines began saving millions. But the newfound power of science gave rise to a darker ideology, the belief that humans themselves could be improved. In the name of public health, thousands of Americans, especially the poor, disabled, and institutionalized, were forcibly sterilized. They called it medical progress. It was nothing less than state-sanctioned violence. Meanwhile, the marketplace for alternative cures refused to die. People still bought snake oil, now bottled as diet supplements, miracle detoxes, and magnetic bracelets. The snake oil salesman never disappeared. He just got a website. Even mainstream medicine wasn't innocent. In the 1940s, doctors injected syphilis into prisoners in Terre Haute, Indiana, to study the disease's effects. In the 1950s, mental hospitals performed ice-pick lobotomies on patients with depression or anxiety, sliding a sharp metal rod through the eye socket to sever brain connections. The man who popularized the procedure, Dr. Walter Freeman, toured the country in a van he called his lobotomobile, performing thousands of surgeries in offices, hospitals, even motel rooms. He called his patients success stories. Most were left emotionless or vegetative. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. American medicine wasn't built on knowledge. It was built on belief. The desperate need to trust something, anything, in the face of suffering. If it glowed, if it burned, if it hurt, it had to be working. Pain was proof. But through all this chaos, something extraordinary happened. Every failure forced reform. Every scandal inspired oversight. After the radium tragedies and patent medicine deaths, the Food and Drug Administration was born. For the first time, medicine had to be tested, proven, documented. Still, the echoes remain. Even today, people chase bizarre cures, miracle diets, detox teas, ozone therapy, anti-aging blood transfusions. Different tools, same dream, that there's a shortcut to healing. And maybe that's the real moral of this history, that we never fully left behind the madness. We just made it cleaner, better marketed, more expensive. So next time you see a miracle supplement at promising youth, energy, and immortality, remember the radium girls, the mercury tonics, the bloodletting kits, and the tobacco smoke enemas. Because the truth is, the line between medicine and madness has always been razor thin. And it's not the past that's strange. It's how much of it we're still living. As the dawn of the 20th century rose over a nation obsessed with progress, America's faith in science had become almost religious. The white lab coat replaced the priest's robe. The doctor became the new prophet. But underneath that trust, shadows lingered. Reminders that the line between healing and harm was never clear. Hospitals were multiplying, but their methods weren't always merciful. Surgery, for instance, was still a brutal affair. Ether and chloroform had made operations survivable, but infection was rampant, and sterilization was inconsistent. Patients often prayed harder than they trusted the scalpel. Yet, people kept coming, because the promise of cure was stronger than the fear of pain. In the booming industrial cities, new cures emerged for new problems. Fatigue, anxiety, and neurasthenia, the fashionable name for exhaustion of the modern soul, became medical conditions. Doctors prescribed tonics made of arsenic, strychnine, or cocaine. The most popular of them all was Vin Mariani, a French wine infused with coca leaves. It was endorsed by the Pope, presidents, and even Thomas Edison. One sip and the world felt sharper, brighter, better, until addiction set in. Then came the miracle everyone craved, heroin. In 1898, Bayer Pharmaceuticals proudly marketed it as a non-addictive replacement for morphine and cough syrup. Ads showed smiling mothers giving it to their children for sore throats. The public believed it because it came in a bottle with a label, not from a street corner. Within a decade, entire neighborhoods were hooked. But this was the age of spectacle, and medicine followed suit. Public surgery shows drew crowds in New York and Chicago. Curious citizens watched as doctors demonstrated procedures, slicing open patients under bright lights, explaining every cut. Some of those patients were anesthetized. Some weren't. They were told they were helping science, and in a way, they were. Their pain built the foundations of modern anatomy. Meanwhile, far from the cities, rural America was still caught in the web of folk remedies. In the South and Midwest, powwow healers mixed Christian prayer with pagan ritual. They whispered spells over burns, buried potatoes for warts, and prescribed black cat bones for fever. For many, it wasn't superstition, it was survival. Doctors were far, and money was scarce. A whispered charm was cheaper than a doctor's visit. In Appalachia, grandmothers carried recipe books of remedies written on yellowed paper. Instructions for curing everything from smallpox to melancholy. A mixture of kerosene and sugar for coughs. A drop of turpentine on a cube of sugar for stomach pain. And if that didn't work, there was whiskey. Always whiskey. It's easy to laugh now. But remember, these people weren't ignorant. They were desperate. They lived in a time when illness meant death, and when the medical world itself was still guessing. Then came a new obsession, beauty as medicine. In the 1910s and 1920s, health and glamour merged. Doctors promised that radium creams would restore youthful glow. Women smeared their faces with radioactive powders, believing it tightened the skin. Others inhaled ozone gas to purify the blood. Men took arsenic wafers to improve their complexions. Even after the horrors of the radium scandals, companies rebranded. The same poisons returned with prettier packaging. Vitalizing tonics, life salts, miracle elixirs. The FDA tried to regulate, but for every scam it stopped, 10 more appeared. World War I and II gave medical quackery new energy. Soldiers returned home with trauma, addiction, and injuries the system wasn't prepared for. Doctors experimented with shock therapy, insulin comas, and electroconvulsive treatments. They believed pain could erase pain, that electricity could burn away madness. And as the Cold War dawned, a darker chapter began. Government agencies, terrified of Soviet mind control, began secret experiments on their own people. In hospitals, prisons, and universities, LSD, barbiturates, and hypnosis were tested on unwitting subjects. The most infamous of these projects, MK-Ultra, used civilians, soldiers, and psychiatric patients as test subjects. Their files were destroyed, their memories shattered. It was medicine turned into weaponry. Yet, amid all this horror, genuine progress thrived. Penicillin saved millions. Vaccines wiped out smallpox and polio. But every discovery had a shadow. For every cure, there was someone who suffered in its making. That's the uncomfortable truth. Modern medicine was forged in blood, blindness, and belief. The same blind faith that once made people drink mercury or radium now made them trust the white pill without question. The difference was scale, not spirit. Even today, the echoes continue. The detox fads, the miracle diets, the stem cell, anti-aging injections that promise eternal youth. They may not glow like radium, but they sell the same dream that science can cheat death. And maybe that's the oldest cure of all hope, the thing that drives us to drink poison, to trust strangers, to believe that somewhere, somehow, someone has found the answer. Because at its core, medicine has never just been about the body. It's about faith, the kind that keeps humanity alive, even when reason says we shouldn't be. So next time you open your medicine cabinet, take a closer look. Ask yourself, how much of what we call progress is just a better-looking version of the past? Because in the history of American medicine, the most dangerous cure has always been certainty.